Connie, could you please call the roll?
Cheatham,
Here.
Lurick,
Here.
Mangum,
Here.
Mansfield,
Here.
Nichols,
Here.
Colson,
Here.
Glad.
Okay, everybody's here, so we will, whoops. I'm in the wrong agenda. There we go. We'll move on to agenda item number 2 is proposed January fiscal year 2024 budget amendments. Go ahead.
Madam Council?
Oh, do I need to read it? I do, don't I? Okay. Finance Department staff will be in attendance to present to council detailed information on proposed fiscal year 2024 January budget amendments for the public hearing to be held January 18, 2024. Thank you.
Madam President, council members, Gene Hill from the finance team. I've also asked Jessica and JJ from the finance team to join us today. And if I can, I want to deviate just for a minute from this has more to do with the budget, but I think it's real important that we do this. And if I can, could you hand these out?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
And what this is again, just in preparation for budget season as we're coming up, I just thought it'd be a good opportunity. It talks about the tight job market, labor market, and it addresses it. If you look at the bottom chart, this is from the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, it shows that in COVID, after COVID, 50 plus dropped, you can see the participation drop out of the market, and they've never come back, right? And then you see the younger than 50, and that's back up to normalcy, right? But then if you go to the top graph, which is productivity, you can look at the far right and you can see how much productivity per day has dropped. And that's the environment that we're facing going forward into the budget season, is a very tight labor market. And it's not going to change for a while. So I hope you didn't mind. I just wanted to bring that up before, so you can kind of think about that as we start into the, salary things we get going into the budget season. With that, I'm going to change now to the budget amendments for, again, this is the process we use is as we go through the budget, because it's a forecast, right, of what we're going to see. We have different things that come up. And so again, that's the reason we need to do budget amendments, is because things happen that can anticipate, some things we can't anticipate. A lot of those things, for example, like if you look at the trucks that were ordered, in 2022, they're now coming available. So we now have to take those monies, if you will, that were set aside in reserves, bring them out, and which we'll talk about, and we can jump into the detail, but we're trying it a little bit different to see if we can make this go a little faster. So what you're looking at up on the slide right now is if you look at by fund, going left to right, and then the adopted budget, which we did last September, and then the request, and then we've got the amended budget. So for the general fund, the total is $809,000 that we're asking to increase. For the street fund, it's $1.9 million, which Tom's here to address any questions we have there. And then airport is $2,600. Transit, $138,000, which I believe most of that is from the feds, but there is a match, which Skylar will talk about. And then we got the science and environment, $113. Sanitation, again, Tom's here to cover that, $500,000. Water, we may see Levi and Justin in and out because we have the rate study going on right now, that they're on site. So we may see them dip in and out here. And then for the ambulance fund, clearly Chief Ryan's here for $15,000 to address that. And then on the information technology side, I can cover that, and then we'll talk about the police retirement. So how much detail would you like to get into, council? You want to go fund by fund, or is this?
I would like to. Is everybody?
Okay.
Okay.
And again, I apologize. It's really hard to get all of this into where you can read it. Can you read that? Okay.
Can everybody read it?
I can't, so I'm gonna cheat.
I can't read it on here, but I can up there.
I have paper copies if you guys.
Would you guys like to pick?
I would.
Thanks, Jess.
Sure.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Since you're up here, I'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first two items you can see are mainly for the mayor's office. You know, it's a donation to Little Free Pantry, and then a donation from the Blue Cross to the Idaho Foundation for roughly $1,100. I'm going to jump to line 3, which this is, we're bringing back, you know, in '22, before I joined, council approved $200,000 for renovation of the finance area. That went back into reserves. So I'm asking for that so we can bring that back out of reserves so that we can get the finance team in one area and kind of upgrade that. So that's what that's about. Number 4 is about the Central Square. Again, this was a payment we were supposed to make last year, but they didn't meet their milestone. So we had to push that back into reserves. So we're going to bring that $67,000 back out of reserves to pay for it. And then the rest of it is paid out of ARPA funds. Planning department. Is Brent here? Oh, come on up, Christine. Any questions so far?
Good morning, Christine Howe, Grants Manager. That is a budget amendment because we received an Idaho Gem State grant to do a planning project for a documentary for the Triangle. We applied for this in August. That's when it came before the council, and so we were happy to be awarded that. And this is just the budget authority to use those funds.
Thanks, Christine. Moving on, I'd ask Heather to come up, but it's such a small amount, I'm not going to spend any time on it unless you would like to. Police for line 7 ICCU grant with a seized job. You here, Chief? Eric? Sorry, Chief.
I can't even read that, bro.
Neither can I. That's why I said you do it. So this is line 7. It's $25,000 for the department to increase authority to use the payment from. Go ahead.
Yeah, we get seizures, and ICCU has given us the Dare Jeep, and we're working on projects with our Dare Jeep. ICCU donated a lot of money to that to make it look the way it looks.
Okay.
So,
So this is just authority to spend that money?
Yes.
That they've given us? Okay.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
This is how you'd like to proceed this? Where do you want me just to read them, and then if you have questions, we'll call them up?
That sounds good.
Okay. So on the fire department, again, Bannock County taking $35,000 for the Dark Horse Services Program. 43,000.
That was I did have a question. That was the data program that you presented? Just wanted to refresh my memory here.
Good morning, President and Council. Yes, that's correct. And so there are 2 transactions there. One is monies received from Bannock County, and that is for their half of the FY24 data analytics services. We're going to receipt that money into our professional services line, and then the city's portion is coming
The
out
other
of
half.
Fund 78
Fund
for the
78,
fire
okay.
portion. Yep.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, thank
The
you.
next 3 as long as he's here, right?
What's that?
I was just saying as long as he's here. There's one for 43,000. You got
Oh,
that
yeah.
too. 95. That's just retirement.
Okay,
money payouts. Next one's for the animal controls, the same. Parks Department, I'd like to use out of Fund 78, an award for the splash pad of $310,000. And I believe that she's on vacation.
Oh, okay.
Any questions on that?
This is for the splash pad?
The splash pads.
Okay.
This is from ICCU, right? The money set aside. Oh, she's here.
I need to make a correction if that's okay.
Please.
So we had two things going on. So when I saw the ICCU, we are working on that for to refurbish our Jeep. But that's actually this is a seizure, and from a seizure where we had to spend some funds, and then we were reimbursed for some funds on the Jeep that we had to pay for storage and for. So it's essentially going to be a wash.
Okay.
So it's not anything that we're going to end up. It's reimbursing the funds that we had. So
Okay,
thank you. Sorry about that.
No,
thanks.
thank you, sir. And the next two are, again, are parks. One's the donation. Yes.
Jean, one second question from Councilmember Nichols.
Gene, I have a general question. So when we get a grant, say, shouldn't that show up as a negative on this?
I think it's for permission or authority, but I can look into
Never
that.
has.
Okay.
I think it's money coming in, right? It's revenue coming in, so it's a positive coming in.
Okay, so this would be then be the permission for the expenditure. It doesn't show the other side of the balance sheet, say that
Yeah,
would.
right.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And then also on parks, we have, where we had the damage that they received the funds from ICREMP to repair that. And then again, on Fund 952, just reimbursement on the retirements.
That was damage to what?
I gotta get glasses.
Oh.
The
can't-
storage building.
Oh, okay. Okay, I remember that.
Now, that's the end of the general fund. For a total of 800 and some odd thousand. I'll try to find a way to make this a little bigger because it's really difficult, I think, for all of us. But moving on to the street fund, you want to come up, Tom? Thank you.
Good morning, council. Any questions for me?
I'm just having trouble reading it, so if you want to just real quickly run through what they are.
Sure. So the first one is the south. We're designing and going to build Tom Kirkman, Deputy Public Works Director. We're designing and going to build a traffic signal at South Valley Road and Bannock Highway. We had put money in the budget FY23 for that. We got the design done in FY23, but the construction we're anticipating for 24, so we're just amending that money over. We had 2 dump trucks with plows and 1 street sweeper that we had ordered in 23 that won't be here till 24, so we're carrying that money over. Now, that's kind of a ongoing thing with trucks. They seem to be crossing over budget years, so. And then the fuel site, we just needed the last couple of payments that spanned over from 23 to 24. And so we did that. And then the other, just a small one for unplanned payoffs.
President Lurk.
Okay,
Next time we'll make it
Linda.
bigger like this.
Rick's.
Rick, go ahead. Councilmember Cheatham?
Just a general question on that South Valley Road traffic signal. When do you expect that project to be completed, Tom?
We're hoping for fall of this fiscal year.
So it will stay in this fiscal year then?
We're hoping our best. The problem we're having right now is what, for instance, we're having with the fuel site. We ordered electronic components in April and they still haven't shown up. So our intent is to have it completed in fiscal year 24, but it will depend on signal poles. As we've talked about with Hawthorne and Quinn, that's what's keeping us from opening that up is signal poles are about a year out. So It will just have to see how that runs.
Is the amendment appropriate at this time then if we don't have that equipment on hand, or are you having to pay in advance?
So that's what we're wanting to do, is order the poles in advance, buy as much of the electronic gear as we can right now, so we can attempt to get as much purchased as we can before we run out of fiscal. So it's our intent to do everything we can to have it done in fiscal year '24, but so unfortunately, we may be back here next year again. Just depends on the supply chain.
Okay. Any more questions, council?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
So moving on to number 21, the airport, it's just taking funds from the unplanned retirement to reimburse them for $206,000.
Okay.
Then if we move on to the transit, this is basically pulling from reserves, the way that I understand this, to purchase these heavy-duty coaches because of inflation.
Gene,
Yes, sir.
can you click the slide? So you're moving on to transit?
You're killing me. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right, thanks.
And this is federal money, mostly?
Scott Beebe, Public Transit Director. So yes, with this being capital, 80% of this is federal, 20% is match. So it's about 27,000 a match.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other questions? Okay.
Science and environment, again, it's basically coming out of the unfunded small amount. So if you have questions, I'm just going to kind of skip by that. Then sanitation. I knew Tom didn't want to go sit down. Basically authority to, the excess reserves to complete the roll-off sanitation truck. And then excess reserves to do a rear load truck and a garbage, sanitation, sorry about that. And then again for another rear load sanitation truck. Questions? Try and keep up here.
Go ahead, Councilmember Nichols.
Yeah, so again, just sort of a general question. It says we're pulling money from an excess reserve. That's money that we had already budgeted and set aside for that purchase, right? It's not like we're just buying a new one with no budgeting.
Yeah, we're not adding any vehicle count. It's just 123 rolled over, that went into our reserve, so we're just grabbing that money to reallocate.
We'll budget for it, the money's put in reserve, and when you need it, then it'll come out of the reserve and you'll pay for it. Is that?
Well, it'll actually, we're taking that money out of reserves and giving our authority for FY '24 to be able to spend.
Right. Yeah. Got it. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Water?
See, is Justin back? No? Nope, he is here. So the first is $1.4 million used from excess reserves to complete the Pocatello Creek Booster Project. And then $175 again from the excess reserves that were budgeted for earlier. Okay, go ahead. I'll let Justin.
Yeah, Justin Armstrong, Water Superintendent. Our two amendments today are one for the Pocatello Creek Booster Project. This is for a closeout. This was a project that we began in FY '22. It's a multi-year project. We're still in the process of closing that project out. We've reached a partial substantial completion, but there's components that we have not received, such as a generator. There's still some additional engineering costs for closeout, developing operating and maintenance manuals for that station. And so all of that cost is to date kind of what we're looking at with closeout. The second item is related to the water truck that we purchased in 2021. So obviously with like Tom had stated earlier, with some of the delays with procurement of these vehicles that are outside of our control. And so those funds were established in prior budgets, and we haven't spent any of those. They've been
an earmark for those vehicles and those projects.
Are you confident we'll get it this year?
We actually just received it
Okay.
last month. So
Okay.
we paid that out of our expense lines, and there's other equipment that is also on order that we haven't received. So the funds were available, but if all these orders come together and we receive everything within the year, then we won't have the spending authority.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Any other questions for Justin? Okay, thank you, Justin.
Justin. Under the WPC, again, it's bringing reserves back from 2023. For the first one is to pick up a Ford F-450 service truck with a crane. The next one is for a Ford half-ton. And then the last one is for the dewatering hub screw press.
Any questions for Levi?
I have a question.
Okay.
Regarding the F-150 Lightning, is there going to be indoor storage for that, just because it's electric, for the battery?
Levi Adams, WPC Superintendent. It's a take-home vehicle as well, so I do put it in my garage.
Okay.
So in the evenings it does stand and stay warm. Yeah, because you just can't leave them outside too long. We got this originally as a test vehicle to see how well it would work. So it'll be passed around through several members of our department to see how it works as an on-call vehicle, as a take-home, or as a supervisory, running around town vehicle. So it's a little bit of an experiment. So we're working through it as well.
Thank you.
And this is another case of the funds were already,
It was. In fact, I got with Tom and we ordered it once the FY23 budget was approved. So we actually ordered this in September of 22, and it was still however many months that is. So it was 15, 16 months. Kind of to help out with our problem, we have the benefit of having a larger budget. So to avoid this, we're going to budget for 2 pickup trucks basically every year, and with the hopes of getting one, so we don't have to do budget amendments, because the funds are available in WPC every year. It's just having the authority to spend those funds. And so by budgeting every year for the trucks, then if we're able to get a pickup truck, we don't have to ask for that extended authority, because we've already got the authority approved within the budget.
sounds good.
Council President Lord.
Yes, Councilmember Cheatham.
On these 2 trucks that we're talking about, they're listed as 23s, but considering the model year we're in, will these be 23s or 24s?
The Lightning is listed as a 23, and that's the model year that it came in. The actual crane truck was a 24. It's just a mistake on that.
Okay. Thank you, Levi.
Thanks, sir. So moving on to the ambulance, line 33, this is really, again, just the unplanned retirement to move that into for 14 grand or 15 grand to do that. Moving on to IT, again, it's to this multi-year service, just to, again, pay that 12 grand. And then like we're doing in finance, there's the community development software that they didn't meet their milestones, so it's coming out to be paid this year.
Okay.
Okay. And then the final one, it's a really small number, which we've talked about before, but this is really the $2 million to fund the net liability that the police retirement has, and that'll bring it to where we should be in line, and hopefully this will be the last time we'll have to do that. So if there's no questions, again, the ask is that if everybody's okay with this, that I can take it towards council to do a public hearing the next session, next week on the 18th.
Are there any more questions, council? Okay, one Councilmember Nichols.
Another general question.
Okay.
All sort of headed in the same direction here. I mean, so we see this $7,300,000 addition on here. I just wanted to confirm, we're not raising taxes, we're not out adding vehicles. This is money that we've already budgeted, or in the form of new grants that we've received. We're just allowing spending authorization expend those funds. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And one of the biggest ticket items, if I can, council member, is, again, on the police retirement.
Right.
That was $2 million in interest earned in fiscal year '23, far above what was planned for the budget. And so we thought it was a great opportunity to take that excess money, if you will, use it so the taxpayers don't have to pay the burden of the police retirement.
Right, okay, cool. Just wanted to clarify that.
And I
Thank you.
can't remember the date, but you did present that
Yes.
plan to the council at a previous work session. Yeah. Any further questions, council?
Rick.
Go ahead.
Council President
Councilmember-
North.
Oh, Council President, Member Cheatham.
Just, there are a number of Fund 72 enterprise payout transfers for unplanned employee payouts. Are these actual retirements that we'll see in this calendar year? Or are you simply bringing balances up in the retirement funds in those individual departments to where they should be?
I believe that it is actual retirements.
I'm curious who's retiring in science and environment.
Or it could be too, Rick, that it's somebody who is, again, this is just not retirement. It could be for a, layoff, a quit, where they've got money that's owed to them out of, accumulated sick time or whatever. Sometimes it's that as well.
So we're not actually necessarily losing people.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And Councilmember Paulson had a question.
If they're both for employee payouts, 952 and 972, what's the difference in those?
So 972 or 952, is that?
What's the difference between 952 and
So
972?
one is an unplanned, where somebody doesn't put in the retirement, but maybe they have health reasons, whatever, and so they go ahead and they retire. And I may have to have Heather come up and give a little more clarification on it. But that basically is an unplanned, so we have to take it out of 952 to pay for that, and then 972 or whatever it is where it's planned, so that it's actually budgeted because somebody's put in for the retirement. Like one of our very good IT people is going to be leaving us, in February, so that's a plan, so it's budgeted, we know it's happening. Does that answer your question? Yeah,
thank you.
Okay. So again, it would
So-
just be for direction.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're just finishing up the agenda item number 2, and everybody's questions have been answered. So the direction, I believe, is to proceed to prepare this for a hearing.
Perfect.
Okay,
Sounds great. Thank
so
you.
we're good to go on that, and then I'll let you take over.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you, I apologize. I was in the middle, and I thought I could go quicker, but the federal government, we were doing some grant work, and the federal government's not fast, so thank you for starting the meeting for us today. We'll move to agenda item number 3 then, is financial policy updates, reserve policy and payroll policy. Finance Department staff will be in attendance to present an overview of the proposed changes to the existing city financial policy. Staff will present information regarding updates to the reserve policy and the payroll policy and receive council feedback for policies.
Let me just change screens here, if you will. So there's not a lot of changes, but I just wanted to kind of highlight some of them. And again, if you have questions, we've got Jessica here and JJ, that, are the experts in this. So again, as you know, it is a policy that all employees receive direct deposit, and it's to their benefit, it's to the city's benefit, paperless, it's faster, with the exception of the first 30 days. Within that first 30 days, as they're new employees, they may not have time to get us a copy of their deposit slip or their information, so we cut a check. One thing we're trying to change, though, is also make it so we could do a prepaid card, so that would eliminate the paper. Basically, you give them a prepaid, debit card or credit card that would give to them instead of a check that they can use just like no fees or anything attached to it. And then if there's also an emergency to where, it's a hardship, we could use these prepaid cards also to make it so that we can get away from checks in the future. Does that make sense? Any questions so far?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I know that there are certain financial institutions and paying bills like mortgages, for example, that don't allow cards. They require withdrawals from bank accounts. How would that function for somebody who wants to use, their salary to pay something like a mortgage that doesn't allow a card?
So let's say it's in the event, because there are people that have situations where they either don't want a checking account or they can't. Not to be judgmental at all.
Sure.
So a prepaid credit card actually is created. It's created a virtual account. And that's what it works off, is a virtual account.
Okay.
So they can go in, they can get the cash and get a cashier's check, or they could actually go to their bank and use it because it's operating as a debit account more so than a credit card. And so in a way, in my mind, the reason I kind of like this is if somebody's in a hardship situation where they're trying to rebuild credit, they're trying to establish those things, this is a way we can help them do that. And again, this is not in place now, but we'd like to eventually get there because it will make it easier for us if we don't have the paper checks.
Come on.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
We've got Brent and then Rick.
But we'll still have some checks though, right?
But yeah, we've
Required
got
for-
it. Yeah, there's no way we're going to get away from it totally. I'd like to try, but it's not going to happen.
Okay, Rick?
Is there an increased cost over this debit card service versus issuing a check?
Actually, it's a decrease because it's just a process that can be done very easily. We just have to, we'd have a separation of duties where we'd have an accountant who would go in and basically load that card, and then the payroll department could hand that out. So again, there's separation of duties, and just give it to the employee when it's payroll time.
What's the cost of setting up the equipment necessary to do that?
The bank, it doesn't cost us anything. It's basically provided by U.S. Bank.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What are the checks and balances on doing that? Does that need to go through the CFO and the mayor? Does that need to, what are the checks and balances?
So again, the checks and balances are that, just like if you're doing checks, right? If payroll department issues the payroll run, and let's say it's a manual check run, the mayor and the CFO have to sign the check. So it's separated that way. In this case, you'd have it where the accounting department would be the one that would load the cards. Those cards would be held by the payroll department. And so you have that separation there. Is that clear as mud?
Yeah, it's not clear at all to me. So I'm unclear on
Okay,
on where the checks and balances are. We've got somebody that okays the issuing it. Who okays that person to do that?
So again, you'd have the card stock would be held by the payroll department. So
Okay.
there's a separation. And then you'd have someone in the accounting team, like Brandy, who would go into US Bank and then load that, make it so that that card that was going to be used would be loaded with, say, $5,000. And then that card would be issued, so it would have that $5,000. But you have the separation, just like you have your check stock is in one place, the signature cards or the signature stamps are somewhere else. So they're separated. And then the accounting, obviously, you've got to follow up when they do the reconciliation of the cash that would be able to see, okay, this card was issued, was handed out by payroll.
So accounting never touches the card itself?
No, just the payroll.
Okay. All right, and then payroll has to take care of all the tax implementations and stuff after it's been issued.
Yes, and it's really no different than a check. It's just plastic.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Gene, I really appreciate this idea. It's a great service. The state does it now for like child support and things like that. Other businesses do it also for payroll, and it saves a lot of money, saves a lot of time. A portion of it's automated. So kind of at the click of a button, you're just automatically loading the person's payroll. But for clarification, I'd like to see a presentation on it before anything's implemented, so that way we can see step by step what it's going to look like and how US Bank how they'll work this system. So that way we see exactly what we're getting. I'd also like to see some numbers on the decrease in cost.
Sure.
Checks cost a lot of money. And so I could see this being a huge savings for the city. But I'd like to see kind of like what that looks like.
Be glad to do that. And as you mentioned, a typical check is $100 to issue a check, right? And these are cents, especially if it's in the automated, once we get it through the automated process. So absolutely.
So I have a follow-up question on that. How many checks, how many checks are we writing for payroll? Because I know a lot of people probably have direct deposit, but how many people are actually getting a hard check?
Jess, how many would you say?
So it's going to differ each payroll between, the new employees are the majority that are going to have their first payroll is going to be a manual check versus the second one should be a direct deposit. So it really just depends on if somebody's changing a bank account or how many new hires we have in that payroll. But it could be, typically between 5 and 15. It just depends. And then those are just the checks through the payroll run. There are times where we have to run manual checks for other instances. So, we like to not do those very often, but there are those as well.
Council President Lurick?
I just want to, and I think you mentioned this, but I just want to be 100% sure there's no restrictions or issues with how the employee can use this card versus if they got the check and they cashed the check and they had money, they could use this card in the same way?
Yeah, and it's accepted at any ATM if they needed cash, because again, they would actually have, it's a virtual or what they call a ghost account behind the debit card. They could actually go to US Bank and pull cash. And it's just a way, like the unemployment, typically unemployment's paid through this.
Right.
So it's just trying to get us up to par, if you will,
But they'd have the option of just cashing it out basically and taking cash or using it as a card.
Yeah, and if you're
buy things or pay for things.
And again, I hope this comment comes, or my response comes across right. But if you've ever been in a situation, where you're trying to establish credit, and you get embarrassed because you go in, and you don't have a credit card, right? And they don't take checks. This is an opportunity, again, if used correctly, to where we can help those who are getting started with their credit and stuff like that, that it gives them a leg up to, if you're taking somebody to dinner or something like that, it's not an embarrassing moment. It can be that way.
Councilmember Mangum?
So I don't believe it'll be a credit card. I believe that it's a prepaid debit card.
It is a prepaid debit card.
And so to help establish credit, I don't see that there's much effort there, but access to funds will definitely be easier, and access to expenditures will be easier with having that card.
I would push back a little bit, Corey, and I know that you're in the banking world and probably have a better understanding than I do of this. But, for those who are not bankable and they don't even can't get a checking account, so it helps them to establish the checking account. It helps them to start establishing, quote, credit, if you will, at least so that they can get an account and start functioning in society.
That I totally agree with.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? Rick?
Yeah, many institutions have a daily withdrawal limit. Mine has $300 is all I can take out of an ATM on a single day. Will this card have a similar limit?
I assume it would, Rick, but again, they can go into any US bank and pull out all the cash.
If they go in the branch?
Yes, that is correct. That could be a downside.
I have an answer to that too. So if you call your institution or call the number on the back of your card, you can request for them to increase that expenditure for the day or for a certain number of days or permanently. So it can go from 300 to 1,000 if you wanted to. But there are restrictions on ATM withdrawals. And so some of that stuff there's always going to be restrictions at some point, even if they had their own bank account somewhere else and they established direct deposit, they're still going to run into those same exact issues. This prepaid card is going to function just like they have a direct deposit at any other bank, any other institution, but it kind of cuts a lot of the red tape from the city on how we cut checks and a lot of the cost on check writing, and it'll cut a lot of time from employees having to manually enter in a whole bunch of numbers and things like that. And so it'll save us a lot of money in the long run.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, other questions? All right.
Okay, moving on, I just want to make sure too that, sorry about that, that the next is that there are no payroll advances at the city. You know, just want to make that's very clear in this policy. Yes.
All right, Jean, I just wanted to back you up real quick and go over back to the direct deposit paperwork, the first one. This is another change that I really wanted to put into place. I would like all employees, we have a direct deposit form that they have to fill out, but I also would like them to be required to have the voided check or the paperwork from their financial institution along with it. We have a lot that I can't read what they put, they don't fill it out all the way, they're putting incorrect information, and so when we pre-note, it's coming back. And so we just have so many issues with that I would just like to make that mandatory, that if they're going to submit direct deposit information, we need the voided check or direct deposit from their financial institution.
Mayor?
Yes.
So what we're looking at here and that we've got on our screens here, this is the policy as you would like it. Not, is that correct? Is this an amended policy?
A lot of it's already in place.
Right.
We're just trying to go through and make some changes, and I wanted to just summarize it as much as we could.
Right, but when we're reading this, this has some of your proposed changes in it already.
Would you like us to highlight those changes?
Would you email the council with the highlighted changes that you're
Absolutely.
changing so they know exactly what we are
Yes,
proposing to change?
happy to do that. Apologize for not doing that beforehand.
But that'd probably be the easiest way to try to guess what we're trying to change and what we're not.
And if that would be easier, we can postpone this, and I can just,
I think we could still go through this. Let's finish going through this, but then the council needs to know what we're changing. You can pull out the highlights of what's being changed.
excellent, excellent. Again, just, you know, and moving on to the final pay, when someone resigns or something like that, we have 10 days to get their final to them. If they're laid off or terminated, 48 hours, just policy. On more applicable to you, if any of you want to give up your stipends and stuff for as elected officials, if you decide that you don't want to receive it, you have to get written notice to HR for that. I think this is kind of where it gets a little bit more into it, is where, you know, it's as much the employee's responsibility as it is as the city's responsibility. For example, tracking time. You know, the employee needs to make sure that the time's accurately done. Then it needs to be approved by their supervisors, right? Exempt employees may be asked, you know, for accountability purpose to track their time, but it's also the employee's responsibility for vacation time, sick time. It can't be on the city, right? It's got to be on the individual employee. Payroll errors do happen. You know, I cannot tell you how many things we have fixed over the last years that have gone on for the last 6 months of things that have happened over time. I think it's not anything that's malicious or anything like that. It just happens. And so again, when an employee, it's on them. If they find an error, they need to bring it to our attention so we can get it fixed. Not let it go on. I know at different times things have gone on, and once we know about it, we're going to fix it. We're not going to let it go on. We want to fix stuff. We want to do it right. And then, you know, again, moving on to the time tracker.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Before we move on, what's the city's policy on overpayment correction?
So we found a payroll error where we had overpaid a number of employees, and those employees reimbursed the city.
Employees reimburse the city.
Yes.
Okay.
And vice versa, if we find something that we had underpaid, and we actually did find that we had overpaid some and underpaid some, we pay the underpaid, and we have required them to pay back the other.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As a follow-up, is there a policy in terms of, can they pay that over a certain amount of time, or do they just have to give it all back immediately, or?
What we did in this situation, because there were so many, we gave an option of how they would like to pay that back. If it was over time, they had a limited amount of time to pay it back. They could pay it back all at once. I allowed them, because there were some that were substantial, we allowed them to use sick time to pay that and/or vacation time, so that it was fair across the board.
Okay.
Are these policies in writing as to how we handle overpayments?
That one, I don't know if that one was in writing until we had an overpayment. Was that one in writing?
I think it was. If not, we'll make sure it is, because it's the same underpay or overpay, right? Again, it's the employees as well as it is the city's responsibility. We want to make sure it's right.
In fact, that is in writing. That absolutely has been, because we've had employees come in and say, I think this is wrong, and I think I've been paid too much, and or vice versa. So I believe that is in
I'm pretty sure it is as well. Time off, again, it's, we have the online software where they can go in and make their request, and then it is the supervisor's responsibility to approve or deny it. We round down, just so you know, it's for those that are on the clock in 15-minute increments. If they clock in and let's say it's 7 after the hour, they clock out, it will be rounded down. If it's 8 minutes, it's rounded up. And then just to kind of give you, if I can blow this up or not, but this is just kind of a typical payroll that would go through. Can you see that? Again, my eyes are
We've
not
got
the
it in
best.
our
Okay.
presentation as well.
Jessica, you want to go through it? Just one.
So this just outlines just the processing dates. It's more for, the departments, the admins that kind of go through this. The first things are just week 1 for the pay period, week 2 for the pay period, and the dates. They run Saturday to Friday. The employee approval period in time clock, those are due on Monday by noon. And then the supervisors have another day to go through and, check the time and approve their time. And then by Tuesday, by the end of day Tuesday, the payroll review. So this is payroll, the department payroll review. So they need to go through and, just verify the time in time clock and in our Navaline. And then payroll actually, finance payroll actually starts processing on Wednesday and finishes on Thursday for the pay date on a Friday. So that's just a typical, week of how we, the timeline of when things need done.
Yeah, Corey?
So I need to backtrack to the time off request. So for time off request, how far in advance do those requests need to be issued?
It's by department by department.
Okay.
It's more of a.
So each department has its own process on how far in advance the notice has to be given to the supervisor?
So as an example in finance, right? It used to be you could take vacation off during September and October. Kills us. It's the year end or the fiscal year end in the beginning, and there's just so much documentation that we just have to have a blackout window. That 2 weeks prior to the year end, 2 weeks after, nobody can take vacation. Otherwise, it's just it's impossible to keep up.
So typically, is it like, hey, you have to have this request in 2 weeks prior or a month prior, a day prior?
Department by department.
Okay.
It's ours is we try to do it every month, 30 days in advance so we can plan. because again, there's just so many things that are dependent upon finance that we need to have that.
So these requests, they go through and they're actually notified, the supervisors are notified with every time that these go through, and then the employee will be notified as well when the supervisor approves it, and that the time off and stuff is kept in each employee's login into time clocks, so they can see what's been approved and what they've requested, so.
Okay. There are questions? Okay.
Again, just holiday pay automatically applies to eligible employees through the time clock system. And those that we have, where it's a physical clock, there's a time badge that's used, just an electronic badge. And then when they leave the department, that has to be given into HR and per se retired. Changing a little bit onto the P cards. This is, it's really a privilege. It saves the city a lot of money, but it's a privilege for an individual employee to have one of these. And there's some responsibilities that go along with it. P cards, like Corey had mentioned, and we were talking about, by allowing employees to do the purchase goods and services, seminars, hotels and stuff when they travel, it cuts, number one, it cuts our costs down significantly. And then there's a record of it. It's just a whole lot easier to do that. There are also some unacceptable things in this, like personal uses, movies, alcoholic beverages, things like that. You may have where a family member goes, stays at a hotel on a trip, well, to pay for their dinner and stuff like that. That's, it's just not acceptable. Abuses come, from, number one, is we take away the card, possible disciplinary, clear into criminal charges. And, we have to be really strict about this. Just as an example, we will have, this just happened a little bit ago where, that's not applicable. Sorry, I'll stop on that one. Any questions on P cards before I move on? Sorry about that.
Okay, looks good.
Again, the idea is we save a lot of money, and information is faster when we use P cards. And then also, there is a reward associated with it, right? So that we can take those points at the end of the year, and I believe HR uses those at the end of the year. Travel reimbursement, is a per diem. Just basically, we follow the IRS guidelines, and then it's reimbursed for one single room. Again, a single room, not two rooms when you go on trips. And then I think there's sometimes some misunderstanding too if...
So I have a quick question on that one. When we go on, for example, we go to Association of Idaho Cities conference, oftentimes I'll put all of the council members on my card.
Sure.
With this, it says we don't do that, but not all of the council members have a P card.
But I think that is very easily to find when you get the receipt, right? It shows Councilmember Nichols, so it's 5 bedrooms, whatever.
Well, sometimes they just leave it under the same name.
Okay, I think we checked that we can see the detail.
All right.
But it's more about where, again, without going there, but a family, they go on a trip to Boise.
That's it's personal use is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. The other example, I think there's some, I don't want to say abuse, but I think needs to be clarification, is if council members or 5 people are going to Boise and they have a city car available and everybody could use that city car and save the city money, if an individual decides that they want to use their personal car to travel there, we're not going to reimburse them. If they have the ability to use a city car.
And that's already in policy.
It's already policy. Again, we're just trying to bring these out, kind of refresh it, if you will. Okay. And that's it. Any questions on the?
Okay, questions on that? My only question is, and it's not really a question, it's just let's make sure we get the changes that you're proposing highlighted, redlined into the council.
Absolutely. So again, my apologies for doing that in advance.
Okay.
You got time to sit through another one?
That's all we're talking about right now is financial policy updates, and we've done that, so nothing else is on the agenda.
There was the reserve requirement, but we could wait on that.
Oh, reserve policy and payroll, okay. So that, yeah, go ahead.
I can
Let's get it done.
get it out of the way. Got to get to where I can go get some glasses or something so I can see.
Okay. So we don't have this one in our,
Yeah, I'm not seeing this one in our file.
This is more just a highlight. I just wanted to, this is the draft. This is just a draft of where we're going with it.
Okay, why don't you just give those to me and I'll get them to everybody. I'm sorry, oh yeah, here's Connie. Okay.
So as we're, kind of, again, the city's been in that 25,000 to 50,000 population, and the reserve requirements, I think, have been adequate. But as we move to a population of 100,000, I think there's some things that we could change that would make it better. And then, of course, the first question is it better to do the service today, or is it better to save the money for later? And inflation, makes that argument very interesting. So, but as we rethink it, go through it, I just want to talk about what reserves are for, why we rethink it, and then some actions that I'd like council's direction on. First is, if you think about it, reserves are really a risk mitigation. It's where we put money away for natural disasters, recessions. And again, to take in finance earnings, we would, you take out the volatility, right? Where earnings are way up, way down. What we want to do is we want to create that flat so that rating agencies and things like that, it's just consistent. They know that we're going to be able to pay the bills, do what we say we're going to do. I put this chart in there just to show you that once in a while there is a blip in taxes, right? Or house prices. And so it's kind of where we're starting. Again, also, there's what's called a sinking fund. It's basically a reserve where you put money away to make a payment on your bond payments. And when you do that, it helps you with your debt rating. It helps reduce the cost of debt when you agree to have a sinking fund and things like that. And again, it's just a way for us to create stability for the rating agencies. And I think that that's a very important tool that the city's been able to do. And we have right now, I think we have a AA3 rating by Moody's, which is really good. And we want to improve that and keep that. And so this is, again, just a way to do that. When we kind of rethink reserves, and this is coming off of, from the GFOA kind of best practices, when you think about it, a lot of times we don't talk about geopolitical risk. And how does that impact little Pocatello? Or big Pocatello, or great Pocatello? So do you know how many conflicts are going on in the world right now that could have an impact on us? We know of two, right? There's the Ukraine, there's Israel. Do you know there's actually 23 wars going on in the world right now? Any one of them can impact our supply of oil, our supply. So that's the geopolitical risk that sometimes we don't take into consideration. Inventory shortages, inflation, we're all familiar with that. I think too that people have lost a lot of trust in government, and we have to help rebuild that confidence. I'm not saying that personally to anybody, but just in general. Social media, we've got whether it's a fact or is it fiction. We have biases of news coverages, et cetera. And the other thing is our resources are going to become more constrained over time. The ARPA funds go away, things like that. Technology changes it. Again, just reasons to rethink how we do our reserves. Thoughts, questions?
Nope.
Okay. So again, as I said before, reserves are just a very small portion of risk mitigation. And risk mitigation covers a lot of things, again, to reduce the uncertainty to public finance, reduce volatility. And these are just a couple of categories that risk mitigation covers. Again, we can't expect to cover all of them, but just an awareness of them, from the business management side to the force majeure, human capital, financial management, mismanagement, and then, as we all know, the pure acts of God, right? Things we can't control. These are the things that reserves help us to overcome and do. Right now, the standard range of risk reserves is typically 10 to 20%. But the national city median is 33.5. Ours is at 25 right now, 25, because it's 3 months, basically, right? We're saying we want 3 months coverage. So again, just your direction, just kind of put some ideas out there that if we took 15%, we put it into a rainy day fund. And what I mean by that is it is not touched unless it's, budget crisis, it's an act of God, it's whatever. Your capital reserves obviously are to put away for our 5-year capital plan. Budget stabilization would be if there's an unforeseen thing, but we could use it just to help with the budget and move things on. That's just kind of an idea, again. When we use these, right? Again, it's more of an extreme on the rainy day fund. Budget stabilization is, as it says, it's just to help us with the budget shortages and continue to do that. And the capital reserves are for the things that we plan on purchasing.
Gene, real
Yes,
fast.
sir.
You go ahead.
So the breakdown was 15, 7.5, 7.5, right? Between these three
Yes, correct.
allocations for a total reserve of 30%.
Of 30.
Okay.
Yep. Again, it's not something we do overnight. It would be something we would have to work our way into as we can, if that's the way the council wants to go.
Sorry, Gene.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
You said we're at 28% or 22%, what'd you say?
About 25.
25%.
It's basically, the standard right now is for the city is it's 3 months worth of operations.
Okay.
Is the reserve.
Okay. Oh, we got another question.
Which for us would be what?
I'm sorry?
If we were to fit the 33% target, what number would that be?
It's going to change. It'll vary, right? But if our total budget, just as an example, I think for 24 was 146 million, if I remember right. So if we took 30% of that, that would be the number we'd work towards. So what's that, 45 million? Total reserves? That? Yeah. Okay. And in doing this, again, I just wanted this more as a direction. But we should consider, how we're doing our short-term balances, long-term, and then a 5-year rolling cash forecast. I think that's something we really need to get done because as it is, we're not able to forecast out far enough. And again, a forecast is a forecast, but it really helps us in our planning. And I think this new software we're getting will really help us to be able to do this without putting a horrendous burden on staff all over the city. And so that's kind of it. And again, I've given you a draft copy of the reserve. And at a later date, I'd like to come back and go over that in more detail. I just didn't think we had the time. Yes, sir.
So
Go ahead.
this drafted copy here, is this a copy of the proposed or what is currently in place?
That is proposed.
I would like to see, kind of on the same measure as the last piece that we talked about, is seeing some highlighted differences on what we're changing.
Just the whole thing, Joe.
Just so we can kind of see exactly what it's
The whole
going
thing,
from.
Joe. Yes, I will. Be glad to do that. And I'll send, what I'll do is I'll send copy, I'll go through, we'll highlight them, we'll send those to you, both the financial policy and this. And again, we've got a lot to cover on this, but
I just would like you to back up to that last slide before this. Short-term, medium-term, 5-year vote. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Councilmember Mangum has another question then.
So with these reserve policies, how does this factor in with, let's say, auditing?
from the perspective of having Deaton or our outside auditors.
And internally.
I think the way it helps us internally is it helps us budget and plan better. I don't think it really has much to do with the audit because we're going to have, whether it's excess reserve or reserve, it's still cash, right? And so it's going to be accounted for the same. And again, it's a balance sheet item, so it moves daily. But I think it's more in the planning side that I'm excited about getting this done. And again, I just think it's time for us to, again, it's been fine when we have, but I just think to move up to a higher standard of a population of 100,000 people, be, best practices, I think that this would be, it's time to go through all of our policies, and that's what we're trying to do, is just take care of one at a time. Economics coming next, per your request from the last time, so.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor?
We've got Councilmember Paulson and then you, Councilmember Cheatham.
On page 3 of this, sure. So it says for 2024, emergency capital stability, those equal 4.29. Is that an increase?
You're talking about on the
this one?
Sorry, I don't have a copy in front of me.
Oh, well, I'm just wondering because 2024 says 4.29%, then 2030 is 30%.
Is that the chart you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just, again, an idea of how we would get there.
Oh, okay.
Just a sample. This is just.
But it's not currently 4.29.
No.
Okay. Councilmember Cheatham.
Mr. Mayor, I am going to urge the council to be very cautious about this policy. There's been a lot of heat coming out of the legislature the last 2 years regarding reserves. There's one agency across the state that has a 6-year reserve right now, and it's causing state agencies to take a look at local jurisdictions and what reserves they have. The general thing I'm hearing down here is 25% is probably reasonable. Anything above that should have an earmark as to how it's going to be spent. And I think we want to be careful we don't trigger a backlash from the state policymakers who artificially put some sort of restrictions on what we're allowed to do. So I think we need to approach this very carefully.
I think that's good advice. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, super.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council.
Yep, thank you. Then we will move on to agenda item number 4 is proposed solution to wild turkey population in Johnny Creek area. A representative from Idaho Department of Fish and Game and Mike Dunlap, Johnny Creek area property owner, will be in attendance to present a proposed solution to the growing wild turkey population in the Johnny Creek area. And council, you thought your job would be boring today. Yeah, that's right. Welcome to government. This, council, as they're getting ready, I might just tell you, we sat down, I guess it was last week, and this council member Cheatham had been approached. We sat down. We had a long discussion about what to do and best practices, and the Department of Game and Fish had an idea. I think it's the only option we really have to mitigate this. We've got in the Johnny Creek area here. Mr. Dunlap has 150 turkeys in his yard. He's one of maybe, I don't know, up to a dozen citizens up in that area that have the same problem. And so they've come up with a good solution. I don't know if anybody loves it, and so that's probably the right solution. If nobody's happy, it's probably the right way to go with it. And so with that, I'll turn the time over to the Fish and Game and Mr. Dunlap.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to my issues. I really appreciate how busy you are.
If each of you at the table, when you speak, if you just tell us your name and...
I'm sorry. I am Mike Dunlap. I am a concerned citizen in the Johnny Creek area. I apologize for not having any flashing displays for you. I do have just a couple of pictures I'd like you to
If you
share.
could, yeah, absolutely. Here, I'll go ahead and, okay. Start them down there. That's perfect.
We do have a major turkey problem in the Johnny Creek area, and I suspect it also extends down the hill into other areas that are sharing the same kind of vegetation and opportunities for the turkeys to increase their numbers. This is in addition to the deer problems that you're already aware of in the Johnny Creek area. This issue is not new and has been growing for several years. The turkeys have migrated from areas where they were originally introduced as a new game option for Idaho hunters. It was not anticipated that they would acclimate as well as they have and migrate into areas where they could not be controlled by hunting. These turkeys are prolific reproducers and have no natural predators in the city environment. Each year, without mitigation, they will almost double in number until the area can no longer support their requirements. Turkeys in the wild have an expected lifespan of 3 to 5 years. Domestic turkeys live up to 10 years. Our situation, without predators, we should find ourselves somewhere looking at a number that's between those two factors. Getting an accurate count of the turkeys presently in the area is difficult. However, I started working with the Fish and Game Department 3 years ago, to address this as a personal turkey issue for myself. At that time, I could count 60 turkeys each morning roosting in the cottonwood trees behind my house. Idaho Fish and Game installed a trap, and we managed to relocate approximately 30 turkeys to other suitable areas. The following year, the number in the same trees was approximately 60 again. We did not conduct any mitigation that year. This year, as they began to roost in anticipation of winter, the count was 127. We have currently relocated 37. Turkeys are not known for their intelligence. However, they adapt quickly to what a trap looks like and learn how to avoid it. They also produce feces at a high rate, which presents a health hazard as well as a distasteful coating for any area where they congregate. They are also attracting predators into our area. Sightings of cougars, bobcats, and coyotes have been increasing. My turkey issues are not unique to the area, although due to the large cotton trees behind my house, they like to roost there. I challenge anyone to spend a few minutes driving in the area and not find numerous turkeys. Only a few of them are squatters in my yard. The mayor was kind enough to allow me to express my plight to several key staff members. Although we did discuss some options, they all had issues as well. We discussed having a controlled hunt in the city limits. After listening to the issues and timetables involved, I recommend we table considerations for modification of the city limits on firing projectiles. It is too late this year to meet the effective 2024 target dates. However, further study is possible with a target date of 2025. One thing that could be beneficial is increasing communication. This could include a targeted questionnaire for the Johnny Creek, Indian Hills areas, identifying owner support levels and recommendations of other potential options. This could possibly also include education and enforcement of existing ordinances on feeding wildlife. One other thing that we did not expand upon during the last meeting was the possibility of increasing the hunting period and limit for wild turkeys that we have in the immediate area. I would like to recommend that we also increase the number of traps available for the Johnny Creek area. A partnership between homeowners and Idaho Fish and Game needs to be developed further. Traps appear to be the best potential mitigation at this time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Brent? So you have 127. I mean, how many orders of magnitude is that over what, say, should be there or would be reasonable to have in the area? Do you know? I mean, should there be 3, but you have 127 or 50 or?
I don't know what a comfortable number would be. As I indicated, they do produce very effectively. It's almost a doubling each year. To how to get that population down to a feasible level, where it's not to continue to increase, I don't know. The only way you would eliminate the problem is to eliminate the turkeys, which
all of them.
It's pretty difficult to do.
Linda?
This isn't numbers, but anecdotally, I went to a holiday lunch at a friend's house up in Johnny Creek, and I've gone to this lunch in years, prior years, and I was absolutely shocked. This is middle of the day. Her entire yard was just covered in turkeys, and they were her house is on a hill, and they were kind of congregating on the downhill part, but obviously had been all over the front yard and the driveway and everything, and the feces just to get from my car to her house was like walking the gauntlet. And I've been there, I think, for the past 3 years, and it wasn't like that. So I don't know exact numbers, but I had never seen anything like it before. Huge increase.
Josh?
So it wasn't 100% clear to me, but given that Fish and Game are sitting before us, what is the solution and what's being asked of council here?
So after we had a couple more questions, I was going to actually explain a little bit, but I'll let Dan explain, or whomever Dan would like to before. If Council, do you want to ask? Hayden had a question and Corey had a question.
I had the same question, but a comment. It's not in city limits, but my office is on Buckskin, and several years ago there were 5 to 10. I would guess there's now over 100 in the backyard. It's a lot.
Sure. Corey?
No. We proceed, please.
Okay, so we went through a number of options, and in those options, we had our police department in with us, we had our legal department with us, we had our our deputy public works director in there to try to, we thought maybe if we close the road, maybe we can do some help with that. It just, nothing felt right until the Fish and Game said, well, our last resort, we might be able to do something. Dan, would you like to explain that, or would you like?
Sure, I'll start.
Okay.
Mayor, council members, Dan Guerin, Regional Supervisor with Fish and Game. Touching on the earlier point of how many turkeys is the right number, wildlife and being able to view wildlife and interact with wildlife is part of what makes our part of the world special. And so there is value in turkeys and deer and all the other critters that are out there. Biological carrying capacity is one thing that we spend a lot of time looking at, and that's how much the land can support of an animal. There's an overlay over top of biological carrying capacity, and that's the social carrying capacity. Turkeys are great when they're in the right abundance, and when they exceed that abundance, they become a nuisance, and they lay their waste out. They scratch cars when they're climbing on top of them. They cause a variety of problems that are really not tolerable, even though the biological capacity says, well, yeah, we can have that many. We can probably have a lot more. Social carrying capacity is much lower than that in a lot of instances, and that's where we're up against here. And so we've worked on this problem for a while. The tools that we have available to us are trapping and transplanting when we're inside of a city like this. It is effective at a small scale. We can get our hands on 30-ish, 40-ish turkeys in a year. But we can't address this problem in its current state at the scale that it's at right now. And so we're working to come up with different solutions. Generally, the last tool in our toolbox for a situation like this is lethal removal. And I believe that that's the proposal for consideration in front of you guys today. Would you be willing to explore lethal removal of these turkeys and using our public to do that?
So in saying that, before we go to any questions real quick, we discussed a draw hunt that the fishing game could do. We didn't feel real comfortable with a lot of people wandering through the neighborhoods carrying a weapon. And we figured we'd be getting a lot of phone calls that somebody's in there. And so we discussed a number of things, but at the very end, the discussion turned to a landowner permit to allow up to 4 people on his property or their property, his or her property, not to exceed their property line. And the fishing game, they don't love the idea all the time. We don't necessarily love the idea, but we're feeling like that might be the only option at this time. A very controlled situation. The fishing game would issue that permit. They would need to, help me remember, they would need to get a permit from the fishing game. They would also need to get permission from the city, so that our police department knows, the mayor knows, the fishing game knows, and then they're able to lethally reduce the number of turkeys within their property bounds for an X amount of time, if I remember right. And so with that, I know, Corey, you had a question, and then Josh.
So I have a couple questions. So lethal removal, if we approve lethal removal, how soon will we be back in the same position? Approximately.
So if we look at a landowner permit in this situation, we will harvest some turkeys. We probably need to cut that population in half. So we're talking 75 birds that we likely need to remove, maybe a little bit more than that to kind of get back under that social carrying capacity. The likely outcome here is we will remove some birds, but those birds are going to be somewhat averse to being shot at, and they're going to disperse to another area. And so it's going to likely solve the problem in this location for a period of time, but it's going to be back. It's going to return. It's going to move to another adjacent drainage. And so when we talk about resolution, we really, at some point, need to talk about the scale and where we're operating this. But I think this is a good step in the right direction for this specific situation, and kind of get to proof of concept of whether this works or not.
So I heard mention of predators being sighted. Man, that's scary, intense. But would this lethal removal, will that attract more predators, or will that deter predators, or what are we thinking there?
So I think the predators are coming into town and around town because of the food base that's there. The deer and the turkeys provide resources for coyotes and bobcats and lions. As you reduce those food sources and disperse those food sources, it becomes more challenging for predators to make an easy living, and so they should have to kind of move along as well. But because of where we live and our proximity to public ground, there's always going to be coyotes around and all the other predators that are naturally found on the landscape. They'll always flirt around the interface of the city to some degree.
Josh?
For this controlled hunt, when would this start? What's the hunt timeframe anticipated to be?
So council, I might just real quick, give you a timeline. We had to bring it in front of you today so you can consider it. It will be in front of you next Thursday night.
Okay.
For approval. And so after that approval is done, the Fish and Game could start that at any point. But there again, the idea here is for them to receive a permit, the Fish and Game in the city to have communication so we know who is there, and the Fish and Game would be signing off, and also the mayor would be signing off on it as well, so that we could control this. It's not something any of us really love the idea of right now, but we're feeling like we're in that position. So it could probably happen by a week from tomorrow.
How long will the hunt stay open for?
That would be determined by the Fish and Game of what the need would be at that point.
My name is Colby Hay. I'm the landowner sportsman's coordinator. So on those hunts, we can set up any amount of time on them. It's all going to depend on how long the turkeys stay. Usually they'll start dispersing once the snow melts, or as the mating season comes, which is between March and May, they'll start moving off and dispersing. But it all depends, again, on weather too.
Okay.
I know the thought process at that meeting was we might have a permit for a couple, 2 or 3 weeks. But then the ask that I will be having is instead of having them go through this whole process again, that the council will give permission for the Fish and Game and the mayor to approve a hunt for another person in that neighborhood up until the Fish and Game decides that it's no longer effective, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. How many neighbors do we have who would participate in this?
That's a good question. There's a lot of fed up people up there right now. There's also a lot of other people up there that either don't care or don't want to be bothered. That's one of the concerns that we have with segregating it into the property owned in this area. I've got a relatively small yard. It's only about 2/3 of an acre. But there's a lot of turkeys on it. Some days, I hardly see any turkeys, especially if I put that trap out there. They avoid it like a plague. The only way I've been able to trap this year is to actually functionally get out and try and herd the turkeys toward the trap. The males, the older turkeys, seem to protect the hens, and the hens are the ones that we would like to get rid of the most. So if we're talking about doing a hunt, which you're right, I think that's the only viable way to do it. If we set up a hunt in my yard and they happen to be in my neighbor's yard, without his permission, we can't shoot them.
That's right.
So the only alternative I could come up with is we need to have groups of people come together and say, we'll allow this particular area of Johnny Creek, these 5, 6 lots together as a target area. Now, in order to do this, we need to get the approval of the people that own that property. That's one of the reasons I said I really think that a good approach on this is to get out a targeted questionnaire to the people in the Johnny Creek and Indian Hills area explaining the problem, explaining what possible solution we're discussing here, getting some feedback from them that will allow us to at least see which people are interested and where we can make some targeted areas.
Can I have
Hey,
one?
a follow-up, and then Corey, I'm going to jump you, and we're going to go to Brent, Linda, and then we'll come back to Corey and Hayden. I don't know if Rick has anything. I know Rick is going to have to leave the meeting in about 15 minutes. So let's go to Rick. You want to go ahead and do it, and then we'll hit Brent.
Yeah, Mike contacted me about this originally, and there really isn't any other solution. I've hunted turkeys. I've killed a few in Idaho and a few in Nebraska. And people say they're not smart. Maybe, but they're incredibly wary. I tried to chase a turkey down by Oneida Reservoir once, and that was the absolute stupidest thing I could have ever done. There was no way I could keep up with a turkey. But they're incredibly wary and they're incredibly smart. As Mike has indicated, once you spook them off, like with those traps, you aren't getting them back. It may be a year before they come back to that place. So what we're proposing here is the only real solution for this. And I'm certainly in favor of whatever we need to do, because I've heard other complaints from people who live in that area all the way even further south to Gibson Jack. There's a problem with turkeys in the road, people hitting them, chasing their pets out of their yards to get at food sources. They're obnoxious little buggers. It's easy to see they're related to dinosaurs. But so we're not dinosaur hunting here. But that's really the only solution I can see we can make. So I do have to leave in about 10 minutes to go to a House floor session. So whatever solution y'all come up with, I'll be anxious to see it on next week's agenda.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Brent, then Linda.
Actually, I have three questions. Mr. Dunlap, didn't I hear you say in your initial remarks, though, you wanted to put this on hold?
I'm sorry, my hearing aids aren't working very
I'm
well
sorry.
today.
I'll speak into the mic here. Didn't I hear you say on your initial remarks that you wanted to put this on hold?
What I was referring to is in the previous meeting, we talked about having to make an amendment to the existing
The projectile.
Right. To the existing laws. It did not look like there was a possibility at that time we were going to be able to push it through fast enough to be able to get it in a time this year that's going to impact the turkeys before they left the area. My comment was, although it doesn't look like that has a lot of feasibility right now, I do not want to take it off the table for next year. And this is not going to be a 1 year, thank you, we're through. This is going to be an ongoing thing for an extended period of time. Because even if we do hunts out there, you could see from the 3 years ago when I had 60, got rid of 30, the following year I'm back to 60. I skipped 60 for 1 year and I'm at 127. So it's going to be a long-term thing, and I was just trying to make the comment, this is something we're going to have to find a long-term solution to. It's going to require a lot of interaction between the Fish and Game Department and the residents in the area, and certainly the control of the city, because you own that space up there. I wish I had a quick solution for you. I wish everybody had a solution, but I don't think we have one right at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Brent?
Question to the Fish and Game. Why can't we just trap them or use some non-lethal method? They become too wary of the traps?
Yeah, they become wary of the traps, and at some point scale becomes a problem. We don't have the capacity to only focus on turkeys in Pocatello. We've got a dozen other cities, some with similar problems, some without, and then other job duties that we have. But ultimately, it's the effectiveness of that tool that really limits our ability to make a difference there.
Right. When you do trap the turkeys, where do you take them? I mean, is there somewhere that people that want turkeys or habitat that needs turkeys?
There are a few places in the region. We've got pretty high densities of turkeys to the south of us. Sometimes winters affect turkey abundance, and repopulating those declined populations with some of the robust birds from here is an opportunity. We take them up to McTucker ponds. That's an area where we tend to release some birds, and we look for opportunities to, get these birds on a landscape where they'll survive and provide recreational opportunity for folks. But that's a finite supply too. There's eventually not enough places to take these turkeys where they're not going to cause problems like we're seeing here.
Right, so the non-lethal options, is that more a factor of effectiveness or resources? If you had the resources, would it then become effective?
I don't think it would because of the wariness of those birds. It's effective initially, but as Mike has said, it loses effectiveness pretty quick. The other hurdle we're up against, anytime that you're moving wildlife populations from one area to another, you have to be cognizant of disease and spreading disease. You guys have probably seen chronic wasting in the news lately on our deer and elk populations. Turkeys also carry disease, and so when we do something like a trap and transplant, we have to catch those birds, test them by withdrawing some blood, running tests on it. That takes about a week. We have to let those birds go during that week because we don't know if they're clean to move. And then when we get the results back, if everything's good, we start trapping again. But you've already educated the birds that are out there, and so you're already fighting uphill a little bit, and as you've got educated birds in your population.
All right. Okay, sounds good, then, Mayor. Just one final question. So the item that will be coming to us next week, is that relative to just the modification of the projectile language in our ordinance?
It will be, well, it will, the next week, the question that will come to you next week is approval for us to allow the Fish and Game to offer this option to landowners in coordination with the city and the Fish and Game.
All right. Okay, got it.
So-
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Linda?
And I guess most of my questions are related to time frame, but also to sort of clarify what's coming before us. I was going to ask some of the questions that Josh already asked, like when it would start, what's the time period that you see it lasting, and you already answered those, but you mentioned, this isn't going to be a one-time thing and then it's going to fix it. So are we looking at doing this at a certain time of year for however many years going forward until we see a reason to stop? Are we just going to try this one time and see how it goes, or are we looking at this as an ongoing thing? That's kind of my first question.
So, President, I might be able to answer that. I think we discussed that we would do this year, and then there would be a need for the Game and Fish to come back next year and ask. We probably would not next year throw them in front of the work session. You might just see that come up if there's a need,
Okay.
see that come up on an agenda item.
Okay. And then my question that I sort of want to clarify related to time frame, but also related to what is coming before us next week. Mr. Dunlap, you talked about, because what we said was a permit for a property owner to allow up to 4 people on that property. But as you mentioned, the birds shift, and if one day they might be on your property, but the next day they're on the neighbor's property. So you were talking about, having a group of neighbors go in together and do it. And so I'm wondering how that works with the proposal of having a permit for one property owner and, implementing some kind of survey or even going around with a petition to get permission and find out who's interested and who's going to go in together as a group. All of that takes time. And I'm wondering if we're talking about, implementing this immediately, do we have the time to do all that. So I'm sort of wondering how all this is really going to work. And I don't know, that's kind of a question for both you and for Fish and Game.
Yeah, from my perspective, the reason I kind of pushed this into the next year is the effective dates are going to start sliding on us. We're getting a slow start this year. Certainly, I would like to see maybe a couple of pilot programs where we may look at talking to a few neighbors in one area, seeing if we can get their permission and then implementing a hunt like that. But if we put it down to just doing one particular owner's piece of property at a time, I mean, there are certainly people up there that have a few acres that they own. There are other people like myself that may have between a half acre to an acre. The turkeys are extremely mobile. I mean, you went out and spook them and they may fly for 300 yards in any direction. And when you start hunting them, they're going to do pretty much that. It's not like you can go in and have a captive audience on my property and take out 8 to 10 birds. You may get 2 or 3 before they disperse into other yards or somewhere else, just fly off. So it's a real problem. I wish I had a solution. I don't.
Well, I guess then go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry, but what I'm suggesting here is we try and see what we can do this year with the idea that the problem's not going to go away and we need to have a good package put together for subsequent years.
So then my question, I guess, to Fish and Game is, do we proceed with the permit that we've talked about for a single property owner to have, some people allowed on their property? Is that going to work based on what we're hearing?
So, yeah, from our perspective, we can customize these permits in a variety of different ways. The dates are flexible. The scope of the permit is flexible. If there was a group of landowners that all wanted to participate in this, we can write the permit in a way that it would encompass all of them. I think so we can handle that part of it on our end. The stumbling block is the shooting ordinance or the projectile ordinance that the city has. And so if you guys saw value in this approach and were able to craft that in a way that allowed us to implement the hunt structure, I think that it would work very well. We can craft that in a variety of different ways.
So we could have like some options for whether they wanted to do their own property, if they had a larger one, or if they wanted to work in groups, we could tailor the permit to what their needs are. Okay. Do our staff, are we comfortable with crafting what he's talking about from our end?
We are comfortable. The Fish and Game are really taking control of the entire thing. They're just making sure that we know and that the city's signing off on any of the permits, any permits that they may give. Mr. Dunlap probably won't be the only person in that area that requests a permit. And he may have a neighbor right next to him, but he may have somebody at the top of the hill that is also going to request this. And so that's what the Fish and Game is taking complete responsibility for, those boundaries and stuff, as long as we know. Now, if we disagree with those boundaries, we can reduce those boundaries and the Fish and Game will work with us and the city on that to make that happen. So.
Okay.
Hayden and then Corey and then back to Brent.
So I don't really have an issue with hunting the turkeys, grew up doing it, but I do have a concern with the gun safety. How dense are we talking about with the I know it's relatively spread out, but how close are the houses if people are shooting in their backyards?
It varies. And that's one of the problems that we're facing here. Like any other residential area, some properties have fences that will have to be dealt with. Other properties have large open areas. Some of them are like my neighbor and I, we share one section of the property that we purchased and built on, and our houses are no more than probably 25 yards apart. And then we have extended property on both sides of us. Turkeys can move very fast. As far as how you handle going into an area and actually trying to mitigate the problem with firearms, it's going to be real difficult. The area up there is not laid out like a city block. I'm sure you're all familiar with the way it is up there. So it's going to be very hard for the hunter or the Fish and Game Department to know where you can go and what you can do. We certainly don't want to, cause a problem with somebody that doesn't want us in their area. The small section that I live in, there's probably about 8 houses that are real close together there. Of those 8 houses, 2 of them have replaced windows in the last 2 years because the turkeys decided to go in the house. So those people are becoming very happy. You also have considerations of hunting across roadways. There's a lot of real issues to be dealt with here. That's why I kind of fell off the bandwagon as far as being able to get something done this year. I think it's going to take some substantial work groups. I think it's going to take some education of the population base up there and getting commitments before we can sit down and say, this is a viable target area that we can attack at this period of time, and here's another one over here we can maybe do a week later. It's going to be a real problem to do up there. It's because of the geography, the amount of trees and stuff that's up there, the habitat that's available to them. One of the things I didn't mention was the city owns property up there that, in my mind, isn't very well maintained. It's creating a very strong habitat for these birds. If you go up and drive down my street, the neighbors have to get out occasionally and trim the trees above the road so a moving van can get through. It's a real problem area, and I don't have answers for you.
So Council, we would not be talking about high caliber rifles either and things, and so because it is a populated area, we're not talking about any of those. You're not going to see people with big hunting rifles out there shooting a 30-06 at a turkey. So, Corey?
No, Josh.
Oh, Josh?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was my question. What weapons are going to be permitted for this hunt? Directed fishing game?
You want to talk about legal weapons, Scott?
Sure, can I come up here? Kneel down
Yeah,
a little
grab a
bit?
chair right there, and you don't have to kneel. State your name.
My name's Scott Wright, and I'm the Regional Conservation Officer for Southeast Region. So under our hunting structures, there's some weapons that are legal for the take of turkeys, although we've already talked about these permits are, we can craft those any way we want. But the legal methods of taking them would be any archery equipment, including crossbows. There's some options for pellet rifles to do that. But the big one is shotguns. And shotguns are, they're the most popular, and there's a reason for that, they're the most effective. The great thing about, I think, with shotguns in the context that we're talking about is that you're shooting, instead of a big projectile that has a lot of inertia and carries a long ways, it's small pellets. And they lose their effectiveness very quick. So, for instance, a 50-yard shot with a shotgun on a turkey is a really long shot. Anything out past that is really long. Ideally, you're a lot closer than that, 30 yards. So, and they don't have the propensity to bounce. And they don't have the propensity to ricochet. I mean, they'll shoot further than that, but their effectiveness and their, for a better word, ability to be able to cause damage greatly reduces past that 50-yard mark.
Thank you.
Brent?
So does the Fish and Game, do you have like your own turkey SWAT team, or is this typically done through, like volunteer and hunting?
Again, it gets back to capacity issues for us. We don't have the capacity to go out and hunt down turkeys and eliminate them. By far, it's greater if we can use the public, and the public values the opportunity to be involved with any kind of control action like this. So.
Right. Okay. And, my only concern, of course, I'd like to see the turkeys non-lethally removed if that were practical at all, but I'm with Hayden. I have some gun safety issues and then also some liability on behalf of the city if somebody did get hit with a stray projectile.
And the liability, according to our attorney in the meeting, all the liability really falls on the Fish and Game when offering this permit.
Okay.
And so, though everybody's going to be pulled into the middle of it, you'll just have to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I think ultimately and I'm not a lawyer, so take that for what it's worth, but liability lies with the shooter. The person that pulls that trigger is responsible for their actions, and they need to ensure that they're shooting in a safe direction and they're not jeopardizing anything or anybody. And
I'm glad Dan said that, because that ultimately did come out, that it was the person shooting the gun.
Like with any kind of hunting accident, it's the person shooting the gun. And I have those same concerns. This is a neighborhood within the city, so I would want it to be as safely conducted as we possibly can. I also have a weird, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but kind of, I'm thinking about how much cooperation we're going to get. We've mentioned, there are some people that are interested in this. There are some people who don't care, but there are probably some people who really are opposed to this and don't want any shooting to happen on their property and everything. And so that sort of brings to mind a vision of property that functions like Switzerland. And are we going to see turkeys flocking to certain properties where they're not going to get shot, Are we, and I know they're not going to know what those properties are, obviously, but if they sort of figure out where the shooting's happening and where it's not shooting, are we just going to be sort of chasing the problem and shifting the problem is one of the concerns that I have. Is there any way to address that or know how that might?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name's Zach Lockyer. I'm the wildlife manager. We deal with wildlife conflicts across the region, inside cities, outside cities. To your question, when you start to put pressure, whether it's trapping or hunting, animals move. And there are those places where a landowner likes them, doesn't allow hunting, harvest, and it becomes a refuge. And that could certainly happen. In this case, we expect we'll shift some animals around, certainly. And you're right, there's going to be folks that really like this, folks that don't like that. If we do nothing, we're in the same boat. The other thing I wanted to mention too, relative to these permits, Colby, when he drafts them up, there's language in there that are very specific on the rules, and we can cater them and give very specific instructions to the people that would be pulling the trigger on how to execute that permit. And so we can, in this scenario, we could craft some language so that the homeowner and their designees understand that you can only shoot in this kind of lane, in this backyard. We can't be shooting this direction, that direction. And so it's not perfect. It's not a guarantee that something bad couldn't happen, but we can take some extra steps to provide that direction to the hunters.
Mitigate that. And I have a feeling that Switzerland will stop being Switzerland if they have 150 birds in their house.
Yeah.
flying through the
that
windows.
they might change their mind. It was just this weird image of all these turkeys huddling on one property,
Yeah, that's
like,
right.
we're safe here.
They might like it too, who knows?
And
Yeah.
one other comment, if I may, we try to employ a variety of tools in these scenarios. It's never one solution fixes it. We start with hazing typically. When we can use hunters, that's a really good solution. There's the trap and move as a last resort. We talk about these kill permits. We like the non-lethal methods also, but the lethal methods are very effective. And I think from optics and communicating to the public, when we can show that, yep, we're doing some non-lethal actions, we're also doing some lethal actions, it's a little more palatable rather than our go-to isn't just lethal removal. We're employing every strategy in our toolbox to try to help address a conflict.
And that kind of was my last question. I mean, I understand we're talking about a problem that has gotten out of control, and so we need some more drastic methods because we talked about the effectiveness of the non-lethal trapping method is just, it's not effective right now. But if we do this hunt or whatever we want to call it, allow this permit, and that problem starts to, go down again and we get less turkeys, do we then go back to the non-lethal methods? Do we go back to trapping once we've sort of gotten this under control? I like the idea of non-lethal methods as well, especially in a city neighborhood. It's just, for many reasons, it's better. But I want to make sure that, like, once we get the immediate problem under control, or, hopefully we do, that then we go back to employing those other methods. Is that sort of the plan?
I'd say, I think long-term, if we're employing
a variety,
that's the best approach. And so I don't see trapping and moving going away, but like Dan mentioned, we can't trap and move every bird across all of southeast Idaho for a variety of reasons. But if in the future, if we get this flock down to a more socially tolerable level, I think hunting and trap and move and hazing would all still need to be in play to be the most effective.
Is that like a fraternity type of thing? Like, that's what I think of. Make them stand on one leg.
Corey?
So to keep from projectiles, if possible, is poison an option? I know then you have the destruction of the bird, but I'm sure that's probably tough.
That is a very unpalatable solution. I don't even know if it exists for turkeys, but I don't think that's something we'd be entertaining.
It's hard to keep that specific to just turkeys. And so all the other avian species in Pocatello, and then you've got carcasses on the ground, and then we would be attracting scavengers, predators. We've been asked about contraceptives. The science and stuff like that, it's just not, those tools aren't available.
Okay, Council, any other questions?
I'd be very worried about children getting into something. That seems like that has some real dangers as well. Yeah.
As we discussed it, the police department and stuff, we all felt like this was probably the best solution, but there again, we wouldn't be even considering not doing all of the other options available. And so I think the Fish and Game, they're the professionals. They know how to help move herds around and animals around, and they know they're going to be coming back. And so if the council's okay with looking at this and considering this, then the Fish and Game probably gives them another tool in their toolbox in the future to be able to come and approach the council on it. And so but it's probably important, definitely important to have the city know what's going on and where, and the fishing game's always been absolutely incredible to work with. And so I think that I can't think of another solution right now, and we've got a very short time frame of about a month and a half, I think, right now this year. And so we can see what happens with that. But so I'll bring this in front of you next week, and we'll go from there. Legal always wants to say something.
It
Jared was on
depends.
vacation, and so he doesn't really have much of a say in this because he was on vacation. And
I wasn't at the meeting, that's
But it all
we would
depends,
prefer the
Jared.
other attorney, please.
Okay, I'll go get him. He did brief me on the meeting. Jared Johnson, city attorney. I think there's enough of us at the table now. We need to put
Yeah.
the table. Just maybe to put your minds at ease a little bit, there is a provision in our code to allow exceptions for shooting within city limits. It's built in as a possibility. The mayor knows I'm against most requests for exceptions from city ordinance because I just don't think that we should be able to grant those unless the exception is built into the ordinance, which it actually is in this case. It allows others, including shooting galleries, gun clubs, and others, and this would be the case of others, excuse me, to allow an exception for shooting within city limits in fixed localities and under fixed rules. So in this case, I think the Fish and Game would be your applicant. They would bring in that fixed locality and those fixed rules, all the things that have been discussed today. It'll really be their presentation, their application to you next Thursday to be able to grant that exception under our existing ordinance that allows you to grant that exception. And then they would get a permit from the city to run the hunt, but then the hunt would be monitored, controlled, and regulated by them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'll work with the clerk and with the mayor to make sure that that agenda request is in line with the ordinance that exists that allows you to do this. And if that's the direction that it sounds like you want to go, there is some backing for that. So just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Thank you.
Right. I mean, Jared mostly answered my question.
Okay, well, you made me nervous. When he gets up and walks up, I get a little nervous, and so.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of make sure that the Fish and Game had the flexibility to do what they needed to do and be able to operate on the fly, and as things might change.
We do, yeah. We can tailor these any way we need to, and we do this a lot in a lot of different situations, so.
And the fixed rules in the application might be fixed rules as determined and necessary and appropriate by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game.
Right.
And if that's adequate for you all, then that's great, so.
So that way the permits, as we talked about, could just be adjusted to whatever the circumstances are by you when people come to you to get one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, then. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to appreciate everybody's attendance, and with that, thank you again for getting this meeting started.
Sure.
Council President, with that, we are adjourned.
Thank